Welcome, everyone. I want to thank you all for coming today. My name is Nikki Lee. I am the City of Tucson current Vice Mayor and the Ward 4 Representative / Councilwoman. And before we get started, I just wanted to take a quick moment for some housekeeping things. I'm sure that all of us have been on more Zoom meetings than we want to even talk about, but in the event that you're new to Zoom, and we are using this format now for our town halls. Based on feedback that we got, I want to give you all a couple notes on how to navigate Zoom, just in case you happen to be new. Couple things to note that this presentation and meeting is going to be recorded for your fellow Ward 4 residents who might not be able to attend live tonight, so they can still get the information. Everyone is going to be muted by default so that our speakers can give presentations without any dog barking, although we all have pups in Ward 4 and we love the dogs. But please continue to stay on mute during the presentation. You may choose to have your camera on or off, so feel free to flip it on if you want to, and you can do that by clicking the video button at the bottom left corner of your screen. You can choose if you want to see speaker view, where you just have the active speaker up on your screen, or gallery view. You can see everyone in the small panels. You can do that by pressing the button at the top right of your screen that says view. You'll be able to switch that around. Really important, if you have any questions during the presentation, please use the chat box. It's just the icon at the bottom of your screen that says chat. Just click on that and submit those questions there. And after the presentation, we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. And if we call on you to ask your question, just please click on the microphone icon to unmute yourself. And if for some reason you don't have a microphone or you're not in a place where you can read your question, we're happy to do that for you. If you do have any technical questions during the presentation, just please select the tech questions in the chat box, and our team will do our best to help navigate those questions. All of the stuff that I just said is going to be posted in the chat bar so that you don't have to remember all that stuff. And finally, just to get us started tonight, after all of those housekeeping things, I'm grateful that you guys are all here tonight and you're helping us get some input into how you want to see some funding allocated for our ward. So just a little history on this. In January of this year, January 28th, Mayor and Council voted to allocate an additional $14 million to residential road repair. I was happy to support that motion because I have heard, from residents of Ward 4 that they haven't had their roads touched in 40 years, their neighborhood roads. I know that this is a priority for our ward, so I was very happy to support this additional funding for roads. And the way it's going to work is that the 14 million is going to be equally divided between the mayor and each council office. So Ward 4 is receiving $2 million. And that sounds like a lot, but as Diana will let us know, that will repave approximately 7 lane miles of road. So today we have Diana Alarcon and Todd Kessler with the Transportation and Mobility Department, and they're going to walk us through how we are required to use these funds and some data that shows us how our Ward 4 residential streets are looking, so that we can use that data as an input into this conversation. So again, thank you all so much for being here tonight and for your valuable feedback during this process. And with that, Diana, I would love to kick it over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Vice Mayor Lee. I really appreciate this opportunity, and thank you all for participating with us tonight. We're really excited we have a short presentation, but we'd like to go through it so that it can actually kind of set the stage for the conversation that needs to be had. So with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Todd. And Todd, I'm going to ask you to turn on your video on your screen, and then you can pop up and share the presentation, and then we'll get into the conversation. So thank y'all.
Excellent. So I'm going to go ahead and get my screen shared out here. Hopefully you can hear me.
You sound good, Todd.
Yes, sir, we can.
Great. So I'm sharing the screen now. If somebody wants to just confirm, you can see this slide, white screen, title screen.
We can see it, sir.
Oh, and then of course I fast forward through it and we're done. So good evening. My name's Todd Kessler. I'm an administrator with the Department of Transportation and Mobility. I've been with the city for over 18 years now in varying capacities, working with the pavement, well, as part of the team and now overseeing the pavement management section with the city of Tucson. And I thank Vice Mayor Lee and her staff for inviting us here to talk to you all about the $14 million local road repair program. And I'm going to go ahead and move slides here. Now, this first slide talking about the resolution, really Vice Mayor Lee went through most of these items already, so I don't necessarily need to rehash all of these. $14 million FY22 monies, $2 million award, and then the remaining $2 million at the mayor's office discretion. Funding for the 14 million to come from the general fund and highway user revenue fund, or HERF. The selection criteria. So after this passed, there was additional criteria that the pavement management team staff needed to, in order to make a preliminary recommendation for what local street areas could be considered. So this slide is really a representation of the rules that were applied for what you'll see proposed on the following slides. So one of the rules is local roadways only. The ask was for worst first local streets. Now it's important here to recognize that rather than fix individual streets, we were continuing and being consistent with direction we received, really continuing Proposition 409 and 101 local street initiatives with addressing local street areas, AKA polygons, right? So what a polygon really is, or how those were defined, were to take streets of like condition, similar condition, and bounded by using logical boundaries. So we would use major streets, for example, if there's a major wash or separation, we would use that to define the boundary of a polygon. This is not something prior to Proposition 409 that pavement staff really kept track of or looked at roadway data. We really looked at township range section as an attribute to our pavement asset and our pavement segments. But as the funding allocations are fairly small, we had to define smaller areas to be able to use the monies against. So we started coming up with polygons, and again, those are defined really from trying to use logical boundaries, major streets, or other geographical separations, and of like condition. Hopefully that makes sense. So because we're talking about the worst first or the worst streets in the wards, really the recommended treatment is a reconstruction. So as we looked at these selection criteria, the treatments, there's only one considered that we'll see tonight, and that is for full reconstruction. Another rule we have is design costs are to be absorbed by the HERF monies outside the allotment. So because these are reconstructions, they do require some design work. That design work was going to be absorbed and not come out of the 14 million or the 2 million per award. What is included, however, is 8.5% indirect costs to allow for contract management and quality control inspections. Another criteria or rule that the team set forth, and this again is consistent with conversations in the spirit of Bond Oversight Commission meetings with Prop 101 and 409, was to look at primarily residential areas. So we do consider, if it's not an arterial collector street, there are local streets that are in what are considered industrial zones or areas. While they may be in worse condition, we really are focusing on primarily residential, and in this case, primarily is defined by greater than 50%. So that's kind of the starting point. And as staff looked to as to which polygon, now that we have those defined in like condition by geographic boundaries, they would come up with the average overall condition index, or OCI. That's a 0 to 100 scale, with 0 being the worst and 100 would be a perfectly brand new roadway. So each polygon got assigned an average weighted condition for whatever group of roadways were contained within that polygon. And as staff were selecting these polygons from a worst first by ward basis, following these rules on this screen. So, greater than 50% residential, it should be recognized that there are polygons defined that are right off the bat greater than $2 million to repair. And so they have to be skipped in this scenario, or what you're going to see. There's also, if you once you select a polygon, if there's an opportunity to select additional polygons, or maybe it's just one additional polygon, it's with the remaining allotment of funds. So whatever that delta from 2 million the first polygon takes out, similar rinse and repeat effort here, where if it's the polygon you're looking at is the next worst one in the queue, however it costs more than the money you have remaining, it would have to be skipped. So have to call that out right front, that if we don't have the appropriate funding, we're not able to select those. So I think at this point, it's my understanding there's a poll that should be presented. So you should notice a poll popped up on your screen, or will be popping up on your screen. We'd like to know your feedback if you believe the selection criteria we are using is fair. If you vote no and have a suggestion on how we can improve or make the criteria better, please use the chat box and select ideas to send your suggestion to. And I'm not sure, do we want to pause for that poll for a bit of time? Somebody wants to guide me there?
If you want to give it just another 30 seconds or so, there's still some people voting.
Okay, great.
We have about half of people voting, so if anybody else wants to get their votes in, please feel free to do so now. Okay, it's pretty stagnant now, so I think you can continue.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so this next slide is the first crack, if you will, at what staff, using those criteria that just were outlined when we took.
Hey, Todd.
Yes, please.
Wait a minute, before we jump to through, we might want to share the outcome of the poll. So,
okay, I'll there.
So just real quick, just to share, we did have 9 folks that participated in the poll, and 7 did vote that they were favorable voted yes to the criteria that was established. And then we had 2 that voted, or actually 3 that voted no. I'm sorry, 9 people. Can't count tonight. So for those folks that voted no, if you have any suggestions about how we can improve the criteria, we would appreciate it if you could throw your ideas and thoughts into the chat box so that we can make that part of the conversation as we move forward. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Diana. Okay, so I'll move on to the next slide here. So this summary slide is a preliminary summary for what this looks like following those rules across the city, across each of the 6 wards. We don't have criteria for the mayor's office yet, so you don't see that. But for the 6 wards, this is the preliminary summary table. What really you should take away, and I think it's already been addressed in the introduction there, was we can fix about 7 lane miles of roadway. You can see it varies a little bit, and that's because not every polygon can be exactly equal across the wards. Roadways have different dimensions and the polygons have different summations there, but it's just over 7 lane miles, fairly consistent. So I think that's what I want to call attention to on this. Now, this using the word preliminary because we're still in discussion. You notice the slide says draft, right? We're in discussions with all the ward and council offices and are still continuing to provide data and in different looks at the use of these 14 million. So I don't know that I need to talk much more about that slide. And rather than really show this slide, I'm going to use this hyperlink here and hopefully it will open up for us. If not, I'll just escape out of here and jump to a PDF map. Hopefully you see a PDF map that's too small to read at this point. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in to the legend just to start off with to try to explain what this map is representing. So it is a Ward 4 map. The rest of the ward are try to black out or gray out. So the focus is on the Ward 4 area. This first legend item is the overall condition index. So this is an average for the polygon. Again, 0 would be basically a non-existent roadway, the worst condition possible, and 100, 0 to 100 scale, 100 would be a brand new roadway, perfect. And then the intermediate scales in between. Now, a lot of times we present pavement condition data in more general category, not as granular. As you'll see here, we have really a 10-point scale here, and usually we are collapsing like the less than 40 into a failed and very poor category, for example. But here, just to help represent this a little bit and separate these polygons a little bit better, we did go to this full scale, if you will. So the colors, I mean, I don't need to go through all the colors, but brown is about the worst you're going to see in Ward 4, all the way up through the green, 0 to 100. And we'll take a look at that in a moment. I don't think I really need to address the other legend items, and this material might have gone out. I'm not quite sure, it might be available. But with these other legend items, really there's some hatching that goes over a couple of the polygons. That is to represent Proposition 101 areas that are still to be completed, are planned. And you have some bike boulevard corridors represented by the various striped or solid lines. The main thing I think we're talking about with Ward 4 at this point are these polygon colors. So if I zoom back out a little bit, we can kind of see our skittle color map. Here's representing the various polygons as we considered them. And there's an I'll zoom in so you can read it, right? But there's an overall condition index, an average number represented on the polygon. And right below that is going to be the reflective cost for a reconstruction repair. And let me go ahead and zoom in. And hopefully we can start to read those numbers, perhaps depending upon your monitor size and how close you are. But just to highlight a couple of these, the worst polygon in Ward 4 as considered is this area here by Harrison and Golf Links. And looking at the numbers here, we can see the OCI range is just under 30, but the cost is 3.19 million. And so for going back to that last bullet item, I believe on slide 3, we would not select this polygon because it's over the financial constraint of 2 million. So really breaking some of these polygons, most of these polygons smaller and smaller, it becomes a point on why are you breaking it? You're literally right across the street. Why'd you stop there? And that's really the intent of creating those polygons, was trying to use logical boundaries of like pavement condition. And it gets really difficult to just arbitrarily draw a line and say, we're going to just do it here to make those numbers smaller. So that may answer some questions, or there may be further questions. But when we look at some of these areas, they may look large in size, but it becomes difficult to keep breaking these down smaller and smaller because it gets kind of arbitrary. And so staff really worked diligently to look at where can we break these logically consistent pavement conditions and well, hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. I did start with that brown polygon because it is the worst one that was considered in Ward 4, and yet it was skipped. And so what is represented, I don't think I need to go through each one of these, but is what is represented as selected in the worst first under the 2 million criteria are these two pink squares with an OCI of 30 and their respective dollar amounts. They are highlighted by this light blue border. And the one to the far east would be Saguaro Canyon. And the next one over is a portion of Groves Lincoln Park. And, you know, I think one thing I should also highlight on this map, if you have an opportunity to actually access it, is that staff did try to, they can be deceiving. Polygons can be a little bit deceiving on what you're getting out of them. It may look like a big square, but not be a whole lot of road. And it's probably hard to see, but if you really zoom in, there is some transparency to these polygons to show what the roadway, underlying roadway network looks like. And I zoomed into this one to show, well, what the heck? This doesn't look logical, right? But this happens to be a gated community to the east, private area. So it actually does make sense that this polygon is addressing the public portion of that neighborhood. And so this, hopefully you can see that. I don't know how much it's popping on your screen or not. To look at the other polygon, to kind of put that in, actually, let me zoom real quick back, and I hate doing that because it makes people dizzy. But you can see the roadway network here is somewhat substantial. Hopefully you can see that. And if I zoom over to the other selection, which is a portion of Groves Lincoln, and we zoom in, we actually can see this is empty. And we're really only addressing this northeast corner and that should be reflective here of the cost too, right? We're talking about $500,000 just to do this little corner, but that's just a little corner. And so that is the scenario of 2 million worst first. That is how those rules play out as we considered them. So I don't know, I guess I should turn this over to you, Diana, to see if you want to make any comments or additions for things I maybe omitted or twisted up.
I want to thank you, Todd. I think you did a great job really walking everybody through it so they could understand it. And so I think at this point we can open it up for questions and make sure that we get them addressed and then go from there. So if anybody has any questions, please let us know your thoughts.
Diana, I think Nikki's going to go, and then I'll go ahead and start going down the question list.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you very much.
That's
I
okay.
apologize.
No, you're fine.
No, totally fine, Diana. So we are going to move into the Q&A portion now. We're going to go through, Teresa's going to help us out by going through the questions that were submitted during the presentation in the Q&A chat, and we'll keep, please keep submitting those with the Q&A drop down from the menu. That makes sure it goes to the team who's fielding the Q&A questions. And again, if we call on you to ask your question, if you are willing and capable based on your current scenario to do so, you'll just unmute yourself. And if you are dialed in, you'll do a *6 to unmute. So with that, Hannah from our team is going to paste that into the chat. And then Teresa, I will turn it over to you, ma'am, for the Q&A session.
Great. I went ahead and clustered a few of these, Diana, just because they're not about like residential roads, but we received several questions wanting to know specifically what is classified as a local residential road versus like an arterial, etc. And then also a couple questions on why aren't we looking at two suggestions was Irvington between Kolb and Houghton, and the other one was Pantano between Golf Links and 22nd, which are more major roads. So I don't know if you want to talk about like Move Tucson and yeah, other types of funding.
Perfect. Yeah, so thank you very much. So as Todd had shared at the beginning of the presentation, Mayor and Council were very specific that this was to go to local roads. So local roads are your neighborhood roads. So it's what's in front of your home. And when we start talking about arterial and collectors, so Pantana, Irvington, all of those are actually considered major arterial roads. And then your collector roads would be a little bit smaller. And I always refer to, like, Tucson Boulevard or Country Club in the downtown area. Those are what we would consider actually collector roads. So in this case, those do not qualify under this program that Mayor and Council has outlined for us. So we're really focusing in strictly into neighborhoods. So RTA dollars are Prop 101 dollars. We do have dollars that are actually part of the Prop 101 initiative that focus in on our arterial roads. As a matter of fact, as part of Prop 101, 60% of the funding that we received is going toward arterial and 40% is going toward local. So this is adding to that 40% of local of part of Prop 101. And it's an additional $2 million that is going to the local roads in Ward 4. I hope that kind of explained it a little bit better for you, everybody.
And how can people get like the suggestions, Pantano between Golf Links and 22nd and Irvington? How can they get those in the queue or on the radar for future propositions?
So thank you very much. That's a great question. We are actually currently undergoing our mobility master plan called Move Tucson. And you can actually go to movetucson.org. And we are currently going through a virtual open house. There are a lot of projects that have already been put in, so you can look through the virtual house and see if someone else has already suggested it. And if they have, you might be able to add some comments. Maybe perhaps you want more done than what they had originally suggested. And if it wasn't suggested, you'll have an opportunity to put a suggestion in. And again, that was movetucson.org. And we invite you to please come out and give us your suggestions, because that is, after all, our city's mobility master plan of how we're going to plan out and build out a balanced, sustainable transportation system over the next 20 years. So thank you, Teresa. Great question.
Great. The next question, I'm going to go ahead and have Jacqueline go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my
Yes.
name is Cesar Hernandez. I'm Jacqueline's husband, and I'm the one who's actually participating here. So thank you for giving me the time, the opportunity to speak up. My question was, has anyone taken a look at the roads at the Desert 4 neighborhood? It's a polygon of about 5 or 6 small blocks or streets. So I don't know if that would be considered one polygon. And I want to know if that has been taken a look at, because the roads here are really, really bad, deteriorated with a lot of cracks and potholes, and the aggregate of the asphalt is already showing up, and it's really rough. So.
And I'm sorry, that was Desert what, sir?
Desert 4.
Desert 4.
It's east of Houghton and south of Rita Road. Jumping Choya is the street that is the only road that where everybody who lives in this neighborhood, in this community, has to come in through. Is Jumping Choya. So I know that they're doing all the road improvements on Houghton right now, which is going to be great.
Mm-hmm.
But teeing off of Houghton is Jumping Choya, and that road is in really bad condition up until a newer neighborhood that they built, I don't know, 2010 maybe, or something like that.
Right.
Our neighborhood, Desert Crossings 4, was built in 2002. I don't think the roads here have ever been improved.
So it might be that the new neighborhood that you just spoke about is taking your polygon and pushing it up so that that polygon is not represented as the worst road or the worst ever. Remember when Todd was actually kind of defining it, he was going by polygons. So if
they're going by the worst first, right?
Yeah, and so it's looking at the polygon that's worst first. So I can't say, sir, but my guess is, since you're collaborating with the neighborhood that recently got built and the roads are probably in good condition, that's going to offset the poor condition of those roads. So we didn't get down to specific roads. We were actually looking at the polygon. But I did write down Desert 4 and Jumping Choya.
Yeah.
So we'll take a dive and we'll look at that for you.
Yeah, I would really appreciate that, because I don't know what polygon this area belongs to, but that was my question. Has anyone looked at it? Because it's just a small area, just a few blocks, that I don't think it would cost a whole lot of money to fix those roads. Everything around it is in good condition, doesn't need to be repaired, but ours does.
Okay, I'm
And I
gonna
was
take,
hoping-
I'll have the team take a look at it. Remember, we're within a $2 million budget, but we'll
And-
take a look at it. And if we can narrow it down to, your neighborhood and the condition of the roads, and if they fall worse than the other neighborhood, then that'll be something for us to provide back to the vice mayor, and let her know what we uncovered and discovered. So thank you for that
I
suggestion.
appreciate that. Thank
No
you.
problem. Thank you, Mr. Hernandez.
Thanks.
And sir, we will get our ward email address up on here. And so if you wouldn't mind providing us your contact information when we get that from TDOT. I know they have the mapping. Every single street in Tucson has been looked at. And so there is what is it called, Diana?
An OCI reading. So yes.
Yep. And so they do have that. So your roads
Right.
have been looked at, but as soon as we get that number from them for that specific area, and I know exactly the area you're talking about, we'll make sure to email that over to you. Okay. And the next question we're going to have Mike. He has a question about traffic calming.
Okay. Hit me with the question, Mike.
Sorry, I had to click the unmute button. So yes, thank you for this presentation. I understand you have a tough job with limited budget. My question's related to traffic calming. I'm not opposed to traffic calming, but I've found it ironic that we will repave streets to be smooth and then put in traffic calming to slow people down. The potholes that exist, if they want them, and traffic calming is enough to slow people down. So focus on streets that don't want traffic calming, please.
Thank you for that suggestion. Yeah, when I first moved here, I've been here in Tucson almost 3 years now. But when I first got here, that was actually my running joke. I will tell you, staff didn't appreciate it when I got here. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Potholes are the best traffic calming initiative out there that you guys got going for y'all. And I will tell you, the staff didn't appreciate that, but I happen to agree with you because we do have to slow down to properly navigate the potholes. And that actually creates safer movement along the roadway. But it also has the con side of it, which is it can create some damage. And, we do want nice roads to be driving on, and traffic calming mitigation just, again, builds in that people drive at the appropriate speed on the roadway so it's safe for all the modes. Thank you for your question.
The next question we have is from Frank. Frank, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes, thank you. First part is I'm uncertain why mayor would have the allotted $2 million.
I'm sorry, Frank, I can't hear you. You want to try again, Frank? I couldn't hear your question.
Hello?
Can you speak up a little bit louder?
Hello?
I can hear a very faint hello.
Hey, Frank, while you're having some, while you're working on that, I can ask the first part of your question, and then I can find the rest of your question in the chat. So the first part of the question was, why does the mayor have an allocation of funds when she doesn't have a board?
So every one of the wards and as well as the mayor were evenly provided $2 million. And we just haven't had a chance to visit with the mayor yet to understand how she would like to allocate that $2 million.
Frank, if you want to try to unmute yourself, I can. Yep, go ahead and try again. All right. I think he wants to know the breakdown of the 8.5 indirect cost, how it was determined, and the purpose of these funds.
So the 8.5 is what our standard cost is today. So just using when we actually are working on projects today, we do typically hire a consultant that comes in and manages the construction of the project to make sure they're meeting all our quality and QAs, and as well as the inspections that's required as part of the project. So we use actually current cost associated with that, and that was added into the overall cost of the construction. So we're going ahead, and once we make the decision of what we're going to be doing in Ward 4, We're going to be designing that, and that'll be part of my current operating budget. But we are adding 8.5% in to manage the construction to inspection, because I just don't have the resources of the staff on board to be managing that. And that's the current cost of running that and that part of the project.
Thank you, Diana.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to apologize in advance if I mess up your name. Is it Dionisa?
Yes, my name is Dionisa. Can you hear me?
I can. You have some questions about Ward 5. Go ahead.
Okay, so my next question, first of all, when is the project supposed to begin? I mean, the ink, the signing of what's going to happen, or has it already been done?
So that's part of the conversation we're having with the community tonight. The Vice Mayor asked that we bring this to the Ward 4 community to determine if we're moving in the right direction. If we're not, do we want to change? And then once we actually get confirmation that we're moving in the right direction or we're not, and we bring that back, and I'm told, yes, this is what I want, that's when I guess you could say the ink is dried, and we would move it into design, engineering design. It is my hopes that I'll move the majority of these projects into construction and the first part of the new fiscal year, which begins July 1st of 2021, because that's when the dollars will actually become available. And my hope is that I will have a majority of them built, if not all of them built, by the end of this calendar year. So by the end of FYI 21. That's what I'm shooting for.
Okay, now again, let me clarify. It's $2 million roughly for each ward, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, and then my next question is, the funds are coming from what source?
They are coming from the HERF, which is the Highway User Fund, a Revenue User Fund, which is what my current budget is built off of, and as well as the general fund.
Okay, then the next question is, I understand it's specifically for neighborhoods, not arterial streets, correct?
Correct.
So can I tell you an area, or are you specifically just concerned about Ward 5, Ward 4, or other wards?
So right now, my conversation is with Ward 4. So if you have a concern with another ward, I would recommend that you actually contact that ward office and share your concerns with them. And they're really good about asking us to take a look at things. But right now, the conversation is focused in on Ward 4.
Okay, and just a real next question.
Sure.
Could you tell me on Ward 5 area, what areas, just briefly, just roughly what areas are getting them?
That hasn't been decided yet, and I don't even have that information with me to be able to share. But you know what? If you want to put your email in the chat room or give it to Teresa, I'll be glad to reach out to you and share with you where we're at with Ward 5.
Thank you.
You're so welcome.
Thank you, ma'am.
Very welcome. Or actually, you know what? I'll make it even easier on you. Let me put my information in the chat, and you can then reach out to me, and then we can have the conversation. How's that?
That's great. Thank you so much.
No problem. That way everybody else will have my information as well.
And what is your job title in relation to this project?
I'm the director over transportation and mobility for the city of Tucson. So streets and, engineering, street maintenance, street repairs, street construction, that all falls in under my umbrella.
All right. Thank you, ma'am.
You're so welcome. My email address is actually in the chat room, and so please feel free to reach out to me, but that also goes to everybody else on the event tonight. Thank you.
Great. And the next question is from Mr. Al Ryruth. Al, are you able to unmute yourself, or did you need me to ask the question?
Al doesn't get to ask any questions. I visit with him on so many committee meetings. He already asked me all of them. I'm teasing. Good evening now.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
My question was, as I understand Todd's presentation, it's going to be a full tear up of the asphalt and laying of new asphalt in the two areas that are listed. Is that correct? Because I
Yes,
have
sir.
a follow-on.
Yes, sir. That is
Okay,
that's our recommendation.
okay, and I was curious in also how many road miles could be done if we decided to do chip seal? Just curious. I mean, the difference between a complete restoration, of course, is 7 miles, but what would you be able to do if you decided to do a chip sealing of those polygon areas that did, you know, they're not in good shape, but I would think would be a little bit less expensive. Just curious.
Well, you're absolutely correct. It is, a chip seal is less expensive. That's a hard question to really say, Al, at this point, because we really need to go out and have the team look at the condition to determine if a chip seal is even reasonable. But typically you can get, we're estimating, and Todd helped me out here, but my memory is serving me correct. It's almost double of what, so for the same amount, we could do 14 miles to 15 miles versus the 7 miles.
Yeah. So Diana, hopefully I unmuted correctly. As you alluded to, we'd have to take a look. Really, just like a single chip seal is probably not sufficient because we are talking about the worst roadways in Tucson. But if we were to look at some lesser capacity options, a double is a good rough number to throw at it.
Yeah.
So I would agree with that number.
Thank you, Todd.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Al. The next question is from Mark. Mark, and I think you had a couple of questions. So if you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself.
Yes, I wonder how expensive is it to fix our roads per mile?
So, Todd, do you have that exact number? Because we actually broke it down by square yard. Do you have the cost per mile to maintain to reconstruct the roads? And know that price can vary too, because
I can
if
calculate
you
something
have,
roughly.
yeah, if you have sidewalks and other drainage concerns or issues like that, that drives the price up per mile. If it's just touching the road and there's no sidewalks to touch and no drainage, it'll be a different price. So I think the price Todd's working on right now per mile to share with us is going to be based on just touching the road and nothing else. Just as a little FYI, federal law does require that if we go out and touch a road and there is sidewalk and all of that, we have to do all the ADA improvements that go along with it. We can't just reconstruct the road and not make improvements to the sidewalk. So a lot of that goes into play with the determining of what the per mile cost is. So that's a really tough question. That's why we go by yard versus by mile, is because it really depends on what is all the content of that particular mile. But Todd, do you have a rough idea of what per mile would be?
I'm almost.
Almost. Mark, can we get back with you? You said you had another question, so we'll get back with you on that answer.
Okay, I got another question. Because this part of town is really growing with houses and apartments, what are the chances of getting some of the major streets like Irvington or Harrison redone? Because they're in terrible shape.
So again, I'm not disagreeing with you. I will tell you, one of the things that I did when I got here is really step back and take a snapshot of where the city's at when it comes to their roads. And something that I've had the opportunity to share with all the council members and the mayor is that, over 77% of our roads are currently in failed condition. So I hear you and I understand that. And really funding is our limitation. But right now we do have a Prop 101, which is a half penny sales tax that was voter approved back. We're moving into our 4th year of Prop 101. It's a 5-year program. And that generated roughly about 100 million. So I told you 77% of our roads are in failed to poor condition, which means they really need a total reconstruct. And that equates to about $1.1 billion, just to put a price tag to it. So we understand that, and we're trying to get to as much of it as we can, but Harrison and Irvington, we know need to be done. I want to say they're in our radar. Right now, my biggest challenge is funding to get everything done that needs to be done, sir.
That's a lot of money, $1 billion.
Yes, sir. Yeah, well, I've been here for 3 years, and when I got here and I look back, I will tell you, there were a lot of decisions made over many decades that the roads were not properly maintained, and no one had them on a cycle of being replaced and repair. So what we have now is everything happening at once. And I'm hoping to work on a practice or a system that will help us get out of this hole and fix the potholes and move us forward. That will be sustainable, but also financially manageable. Because as you said, it's a lot of money, and everybody's fighting for dollars right now to be successful. Every single time we use dollars to do a road, it's affecting where a dollar doesn't go. So I'm really working on what we can do and the best deal that we can get to get it done, and try to see that we can touch all of those roads in the next 10 years to move us out of this conundrum we're in, and then get us on a program where we're rotating the roads and getting them done on an annual basis, so that we'll never be in this pocket again. Todd, can you share that average cost per mile?
Yeah, so again, there's really roughly, right? Because it depends how much steel's in the road, meaning manholes, water valves, blah, blah, blah. There's so many variables, but, and if I would have had the number sooner, if I'd have looked at the staff provided. So if we talk about just one direction, a mile, right? One lane width is 270,000. So if you want to come back on that same said mile the other way, you're looking at $540,000. Just real rough numbers to throw
and
out
that's just touching the road. So keep in mind, if we have sidewalks, we have to touch that. And if we're touching sidewalks, we're then touching drainage. So that's a very, very conservative number. When you start throwing in all of the other ones, I've seen cost of redoing 1 lane mile being almost up to 100 to about $1.7 million, depending on what all is involved with it. So it's really about the content of the street.
Doesn't seem like we're ever going to catch up.
Well, we do have a challenge, but I'm always up for a challenge, sir.
Good luck.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for your questions.
There were a couple questions when you were speaking, Diana, just asking specifically about what you were just talking about, some follow-ups. So someone wanted to know, when you mentioned sidewalks for ADA, what specifically are you talking about?
So federal law, adjusts over time. And so a lot of our sidewalks are dated as old as the roads. But since 2011, new standards and requirements have been put in that would require us to actually go in and replace ADA ramps. If you do not have ADA ramps, we have to put them in place. If there is obstructions in the sidewalk, we might have to move those obstructions because we're required to provide a certain amount of width in the sidewalk. So we look at all of those new federal guidelines that were put into place in 2011. I will tell you, there's also some additional new standards that the federal government's getting ready to come out with based on ADA improvements, which are going to have even brand newer standards that we'll have to follow. So when we touch a road, federal guideline says you'll touch the sidewalks, you'll make those improvements. So if the sidewalk was built and the slope is more than 2%, and just imagine if you're in a wheelchair, with us walking, we don't even notice the 2%. But if you're in a wheelchair or you're in a walker, that 2%, if it's more than that, is extremely noticeable. So trying to get up over that curb for more than a 2% curb is really, really tough. So those are some of the standards that we have to follow per federal guidelines.
And someone asked about how do they know which roads will be fixed with like Prop 101 and the RTA. We can get in the chat, if Hannah, if you can put the Tucson Delivers website, That will have all of the proposition roads and even more information about what's coming funding for parks and public safety as well. But the Tucson Delivers will have all of those on there, as well as the RTA. If you can do the RTA link as well, so people can see that. And then Diana, if you can just explain really, overall, what is a HERF fund, what is RTA fund, and why do we keep saying prop funds?
Okay, so the highway user revenue fund is actually the sales tax dollars that are collected from gasoline sales. And based on our population, we get a certain percentage of that comes to the city that is to go toward transportation initiatives. Now, that's not just your roads, that's also the traffic signals, that's the planning involved, that's everything that's tied to transportation. And so our budget, my budget, is actually managed through HERF dollars. So I do not typically use general fund dollars. I'm using the highway user revenue funds in my budget to manage all of the transportation initiatives we have going on. Back in 2006, there was a half-penny sales tax that was approved. It was a 20-year sales tax, and that was approved by the voters. It was a ballot approval, and it was also a transportation improvement plan that went to the voters, and there are specific projects in that half penny that were voted on. So RTA dollars are kind of set in stone, and we can only spend them on those projects that were approved by that ballot amount back in 2006. So we're currently working on a lot of the projects. So Halton Road right now is actually under construction. That's an RTA project. The funding of that is coming from RTA dollars as well as impact dollars that we've generated through development. So those are some of the ways that we can actually move the larger projects. Those type of projects usually run, close up into the million. I remember correct, Halton has a price tag of roughly around $60 million. So it's not cheap to be expanding roadways because you have to do drainage. You have to apply ADA standards, so new sidewalks, we're putting in lighting, we're expanding the roads. And sometimes in some issues, if we were able to get ahead of it, we're able to add bike lanes. In other cases, we weren't successful with it. And then with Prop 101, that was actually another half penny sales tax. It was a 5-year plan that went out to the voters and was approved. And it actually generates $225 million, and $125 million of that is going toward public safety improvements, so toward police and fire improvements, and then $100 million was dedicated toward road improvements. So we get roughly $20 million on an annual basis that goes toward roadway improvements. That plan too has a bond oversight commission that we actually took a plan to and said, here's the best way we feel the dollars can be spent. Again, looking at the criteria that was established, and I think as Todd said, a lot of the criteria that we followed here tonight was what we also have, what was adopted by the Bond Oversight Commission. So it's the worst roads first, looking at that. And again, we do it through polygons. So those are really some of the major tax opportunities, funding opportunities we have right now to do road repairs. There is also another half penny sales tax that recently got approved by the voters a couple years ago, and that was for Prop 407, and that's for parks and bonds. And so a certain amount of the dollars of that prop is going toward fixing parks, and then another part is going toward connections, which is our bike boulevards, our connections to the parks, and our greenways. So we have a little bit of a lot of little bit of things going on at one time. I hope that addressed that question.
Diana, I wanted to add
Yes,
something additional to the conversation about HERF funds specifically that I think is really important to what Mark was talking about and what you all are talking about in terms of how far behind we are. And hopefully, Diana, if you have some additional conversation to add to this, please do. But one of the things that I became aware of because the HERF fund is generated from gas sales, is that the more and more energy efficient, electric cars that come on board, fuel efficient vehicles, we're selling less gas and we're generating less dollars. So I feel like we are in a pickle, right? We have so much to catch up on, and we're not collecting as much from gas tax right now. So we really have to keep the eye on the ball. So Mark, as you were talking about, we have a monumental task ahead of us to get caught up. And as fuel efficiency continues to get better, which I know from an environmental perspective, we are all happy about that, we have to be innovative in how we're going to fund our roads moving forward. So Diana, feel free to add to that, but that's just a larger theme that I think we have to keep our eye on as we're talking about all of this.
Yeah, I could spend all evening having a conversation built just about how to properly fund infrastructure. And you're absolutely correct, Vice Mayor. And this isn't, something that is just happening for the city of Tucson. This is happening across the nation. So, when I have an opportunity to talk to any elected official, our Congress folks and our senators, I'm always saying we really need to talk about, as a nation, not just as a city or a state, but as a nation, we really need to talk about how we're going to properly fund our infrastructure. Because you're absolutely correct, Vice Mayor. We do want to apply these sustainable practices. We want to start using less fossil fuel, but that is what generates our fund. So it is really, we're going to have to, as a community, we really, and I'm really hoping that the new administration will kind of lead that conversation. His plan, his American Rescue Plan, his American plan that he's putting out, that has I can't remember the dollars off mine, but billions of dollars to go toward infrastructure, is really dedicated and focusing in on that shortfall of the shrinkage of gas tax. But I think that we're now in an environment where we can, as a nation, have a conversation about what is that appropriate application of funding future infrastructure. Otherwise, everyone's going to be playing catch up. Everyone's going to be delaying deferred maintenance, and it'll be a continuous cycle. And you're absolutely correct. We won't get out of it unless we continue to do what we've done through Prop 101, where cities are taking it on themselves and actually issuing these additional sales tax that aren't just tied to gasoline, they're tied to other forms of business that help fund some of these projects to get done.
Thank you for indulging me on that one, Diana, because I always look for the larger connection and down into the future. And that's definitely a big concern that I have, is we're already behind, we're working. And I just want to make sure we can keep moving forward. And that's a big concern of mine. Teresa, is there anything else we want to touch on in terms of Q&A? I want to respect everyone's time, and we have about 2 minutes left. Is there any other Q&A that you wanted to touch on before we kind of wrap up for tonight?
We have a lot of questions still in the queue, but if I'm trying to manually go through and let folks know to send me, I'm Teresa, I am Q&A. So go ahead and just send a chat to me, Q&A, and send me your email address, and we'll make sure that we get it over to TDOT to help answer your questions.
Perfect. Amazing. Well, again, as we close out tonight, I just want to thank everyone for participating in the discussion. I want to thank Diana and Todd and my team, as always, for facilitating this, putting this together so that we can have this conversation, because this is the feedback that is incredibly valuable for us to understand how you want us to spend your tax dollars to get the most value for Ward 4. We're going to post this presentation, this recording, on the Ward 4 website, which is probably going to be in the chat. There it is, Ward 4. TucsonAZ.gov/Ward 4. Our email address is ward4@TucsonAZ.gov. I just want to do a quick plug before we jump off for the night for our next regular town hall. This was kind of a special one because we wanted to focus on this topic, but that's going to be on Thursday, April 29th at 5:30. Everyone is welcome to attend, as always. This one will be focused on the Mesquite Ranch Neighborhood Association and what's going on there for them. But again, it's open to all who want to participate, and that information is at TucsonAZ.gov/Ward 4 as well. So with that, please take care, everyone, and have a great evening, and thanks for your attendance tonight.
Thank you.